All right, let's get right into this explainer. Today we're looking at AI, but we are absolutely not looking at it as some parlor trick or a neat little chat interface. We are looking at it as a massive, rapidly shifting global economy where the meter is quite literally always running. Because here's the thing. 3 years post-ChatGPT, the demonstration phase, it's entirely over. We're now dealing with a fully operational global machine.
So what actually happens when AI stops being a cool demo and becomes an economy? To understand the hidden machinery paying for this massive boom, we really have to peel back the onion. And we have to start with the foundational unit of this entire ecosystem. It's not the data center, it's not the GPU, and it's not even the algorithm.
It's the token. The token is the smallest chunk of model input or output, and it has suddenly become a hyper-measurable operating expense. Every single prompt, every retrieval, every step an autonomous agent takes, it is all metered. This single tiny unit is currently reorganizing everything. We're talking enterprise budgets, massive infrastructure financing, all the way up to US GDP and geopolitical power.
Today, we're going to dissect this ecosystem step by step. We'll cover the deflation paradox, enterprise ROI, NVIDIA's role as a central bank, CAPEX and US GDP, the illusion of sovereignty, and finally, AI meets Web3.
Okay, starting off with Section 1, the deflation paradox, where we see falling prices but rising costs.
The sheer scale of the deflationary shock we're seeing right now is just staggering. Thanks in large part to China's incredibly aggressive open weight models undercutting the market, the cost of AI inference per unit of quality has absolutely plummeted. We are talking about a 1,000-fold drop in just 3 years. OpenAI's cheapest model now prices around 9 cents per million tokens. For context, that was $33 when GPT-4 launched. That is a price collapse with basically zero precedent in enterprise technology.
Now, vendors love to bring up the 160-year-old Jevons paradox to claim that cheaper AI just means demand skyrockets. It's like how more efficient coal engines back in the 1800s actually increased total coal use, right? But the crucial point here is that they use this paradox super selectively. They use it to justify multi-trillion-dollar investments while completely hiding the two-tier reality of the market. Yes, the commodity tier is indeed crashing in price, but the frontier tier, those advanced reasoning models, that price declines much slower and is actively rationed by providers. So this whole demand always wins narrative really just protects hyperscaler valuations while masking a deeply divided reality.
Which brings us to Section 2, Enterprise FinOps and ROI. Basically, the bill comes due.
Because falling unit prices absolutely do not mean falling spending for the actual businesses using these tools. Listen to some of these real-world impacts. Uber blew through its entire 2026 AI coding budget by April. Microsoft literally had to revoke its own developers' access to Claude Code just to cut costs. Priceline saw a Cursor renewal come back 4 to 5 times higher. And one firm reportedly got hit with a $500 million surprise bill simply because they failed to set usage limits. Token accounting is proving to be trillions of rows harder than traditional cloud accounting, especially once you introduce autonomous agents that just rapidly fire off countless downstream model calls until they hit a goal.
This brings up a brilliant, albeit inconvenient truth. Alex Karp over at Palantir framed per-token pricing as essentially a de facto wealth tax on productive enterprises. It shifts the measurement risk entirely onto the customer. Think about it. If AI vendors price based on actual business outcomes, they'd have to prove the value. But by charging per token, completely regardless of the output's quality, they force enterprises to take all the risk. They are effectively transferring their competitive edge, their alpha, upstream to the model providers.
So if enterprises are struggling to pay up, how is this underlying infrastructure actually being financed? That brings us to Section 3, NVIDIA as central bank, the compute financing machine.
We are staring down a projected $7.1 trillion debt market by 2029, and quietly, NVIDIA has stepped into this lender of last resort role, functioning very much like a central bank. They're using their massive AA credit rating to guarantee a revenue floor for new emerging cloud providers, these so-called neoclouds. If third-party demand falls short, NVIDIA acts as the backstop. This drastically lowers the cost of borrowing for these neoclouds, making them bankable and pulling unsecured yields down from roughly 10% to much closer to that highly secure 5.9% mark.
And the market is deeply divided on how to view this circular financing structure. Are we looking at a house of cards ready to topple, relying on guarantor credit as a single point of failure, kind of like the monoline insurers right before the 2008 crash? Or is this simply a highly profitable vendor build-out that's amplifying real, tangible infrastructure, much like Cisco did in the 1990s? The entire ecosystem's stability rests entirely on which historical rhyme proves true.
Let's zoom out to the macro level for Section 4, AI CapEx and U.S. GDP, the new growth pillar.
Independent research is pointing to an almost unbelievable reality. In the first quarter of 2026, AI capital expenditures drove roughly 75% of U.S. GDP growth. AI is not just a hot sector of the economy anymore, folks. It literally is the marginal economy. It is acting as the primary load-bearing pillar for U.S. economic growth right now, with all other sectors trailing incredibly far behind.
This creates an absolutely fascinating macro-political dynamic. Think about it. If the U.S. state needs AI-driven productivity to convince international creditors that its future cash flows will cover a $39 trillion national debt, well then, this build-out is structurally unstoppable by policy. Halting it would immediately trigger a recession. The state has a massive sovereign interest in sustaining this momentum, almost regardless of whether the micro-level ROI for individual enterprises ever actually clears.
This massive concentration of economic weight triggers our next theme in Section 5, the illusion of sovereignty and the return of geography. The Anthropic kill switch incident in June of 2026 proved that geographical control is not just some abstract concept. Right after Europe commits 20 billion euros to infrastructure, a single U.S. commerce order forces a major provider to cut off foreign nationals, affecting even close allies literally overnight. Within days, foreign states started dropping U.S. providers because they realized, hey, we can't depend on partners who are capable of just turning off the tap on a whim.
This forces a really hard choice, especially for states like Singapore who are actively navigating this space. It boils down to hardware sovereignty versus knowledge sovereignty. Spending billions on highly visible hardware, like buying massive GPU clusters, well, that buys the least defensible layer. It's fungible and it depreciates fast. But the invisible knowledge layer, the curated, structured, local data that actually makes an AI trustworthy and culturally aligned to your specific nation, that cannot be imported. That is where true durable independence actually lies.
Finally, let's look at where this is all heading in Section 6, AI meets Web 3, moving from output to monetary object.
We are witnessing the incredibly weird convergence of two total opposites. On one side, you have the AI token. This is a unit of work engineered to relentlessly fall in price, trending toward the basic cost of electricity. On the other side, you have the crypto token, which is designed as a bearer instrument and a disinflationary store of value. These two worlds are colliding. As compute becomes a tradable commodity, the AI token is starting to acquire real crypto token characteristics.
Now, the mainstream AI industry tends to ignore this convergence, largely because of the reputational risks post-2022. But the reality on the ground is moving incredibly fast. We're seeing deep-end networks crowdsourcing compute and settling in crypto. We're seeing OKX agent-to-agent marketplaces, where an AI hires another AI and settles the bill in stablecoins. We're witnessing the birth of tokenized AI futures and cryptographic trust primitives like ZKML that literally allow machines to verify work. Traditional finance securitizing compute and Web3 tokenizing compute are building the exact same market from opposite ends.
Which leaves us with the ultimate $7 trillion question. Everything we've covered today, the enterprise ROI, NVIDIA's backstop, US GDP growth, and global sovereignty, it all resolves down to one massive wager. Does token volume outrun token deflation before the bill comes due? Will the sheer demand for compute outpace the collapsing cost of a token, or are we going to see a massive glut? The answer to that single question will determine who controls the global economy for the next decade. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this helps you see the board a little more clearly.